Vash the Stampede, the humanoid typhoon, the legendary gunslinger with a $60 billion double dollar bounty on his head. Wandering the wastes of the planet Gunsmoke, the human natural disaster brings misfortune and destruction wherever he goes. Vash's story was originally conceived as a manga serialized in Shonen magazine Monthly Shonen Captain, and written by Yasuhiro Naitao. The original manga would run for 2 years until the magazine closed its doors in 1997. Trigun would then be picked up by Seinen magazine, Young King Hours, and rebranded as Trigun Maximum, where it would run for another 10 years, finally coming to a conclusion in 2007. Back in 1998, anime studio Madhouse would create an adaptation of the sci-fi western that would run for a single 26-episode season. As was the style for 90s anime at the time, the show would rapidly outpace the source material that was the Trigun manga, and they would sort of have to come up with an ending on their own. What we did get for an anime adaptation, however, is a fun, heartfelt romp through a world inspired by spaghetti westerns and some all-time sci-fi classics. It's an adventure through an imaginative world of dusty saloons and rough-and-tumble gunmen, and at its core, Trigun is the tale of two brothers with opposing ideologies learning to deal with the consequences of each other's actions. It's a story about personal morals, living up to your own ideals, but also being able to adapt and overcome. Trigun is carried by an interesting cast of core characters that are fun to watch tear across the wastes, as our main character Vash collects a crew of friends that get caught up in his wake. Of course, there's Meryl and MIllie, two women who work for the Bernardeli Insurance Society. They've been assigned to follow Vash and document the ensuing destruction so that the company can come to a conclusion on how to reimburse all those affected by the human typhoon. There's also fan favorite Nicholas D. Wolfwood, a traveling man of God who literally carries the weight of all his sins in the form of a huge cross. Of course, no action anime is complete without a memorable cast of villains, and while I'll talk more about each of them in detail later, suffice it to say that Trigun does not disappoint in this department either. Who could ever forget characters like Brilliant Dynamite's Neon or Mid-Valley the Horn Freak? Yeah, dudes that could only exist in anime. I've seen Trigun once before, all the way through back in 2015. So while I remember most of the major story beats, it wasn't exactly fresh in my mind for this viewing. I honestly found myself really enjoying this series all over again. A lot of it boils down to single episode vignettes of our characters dealing with hostile situations, relating to the townspeople, citizens, and environments of the world. While there is an overarching story, it doesn't really pick up until the back half of the show, and even then they find ways to stick a few one-off episodes in here and there. This makes the pace of the show feel pretty fast, as every episode is usually a new location with a new problem and new side characters. And the characters being colorful is really a great thing, because the majority of the show takes place in barren deserts and towns that are just barely scraping by. Once you've seen one sandy city, you've kind of seen them all. Trigun is a rather unique story that I don't think a lot of new viewers expect at the outset, and with a new adaptation coming out in 2023 with Trigun Stampede, what better time could there be to talk about the original 1998 anime?
I'm afraid I have to go. I have no choice. We have a job to do.
It's your job or your life.
Our story opens in the most common of Western settings, a dingy saloon somewhere on the frontier. Rough and tumble gunmen hang around swilling stale-looking drinks while gossiping about someone named Vash the Stampede, an apparently legendary outlaw that destroyed an entire town. A man in a striking long red coat drinks alone at the bar, though he isn't able to enjoy the liquor for long as a group of bounty hunters show up and blast away the entire building. The animation in this segment is just phenomenal. The way the bullets just tear apart the walls and furniture is so detailed. It's really a treat for the eyes, which is nice because it's a 90s anime and that quality sadly does not hold up all the way through. Our whiskey-drinking hero draws his big iron and the camera cuts to the dual suns as the high noon duel unfolds and we hear a litany of gunfire. We then cut to the episode title card with that awesome sustained guitar chord. The music in Trigun is just flat out amazing. It really nails that Western feeling down to a T. The opening song, HT, composed by Suneo Imahori, is a complete earworm that evokes notes of Led Zeppelin and other Western music. It's crazy. Not that Led Zeppelin is Western, please don't kill me. I'll be humming it for a while, that's for sure. The man composed the rest of the OST as well, and there's really just not a bad track in here. It's unique for its time, and most importantly, it does a great job of setting the show's tone and pairs perfectly with the sun-bleached Badlands of Planet Gunsmoke. Going along with the soundtrack is the explosive effect of Trigun's gunfire. Every pull of the trigger is accompanied by a weighty gut punch that really sounds like it would kill you good.
No, don't! Stop it!
Our two insurance inspectors, Meryl and MIllie, show up looking for Vash, and it seems like they aren't the only ones. An assortment of bounty hunters and outlaws are gunning for his head. Everyone is out for the immense bounty on Vash, except Meryl and MIllie, who only wish to document his exploits as part of their job for the Bernardeli Insurance Society. After a rather deadly case of mistaken identity, the two are united with the man in the red coat, who they really don't want to believe is the real Vash. See, he's sort of not what you would expect from a legendary outlaw that has leveled entire buildings and cities. He's just sort of, an idiot. Vash bumbles around and mostly runs from trouble, seeming to only get through most situations with absolute blind luck. Although, as the audience, we can see that Vash is undoubtedly skilled, he just seems to be hiding it from everyone. The opening act of Trigun does use Vash's identity as a sort of plot point. He never really admits to Meryl that he's Vash the Stampede until the end of episode 5. The opening episodes are all one-off stories that actually serve to introduce us to the world and the characters, all while sprinkling in some details about Vash's overall past that are there to hook us into the overarching narrative. Vash doesn't even have his signature hand cannon until episode 3, where he receives a repaired version of it from the gunsmith Frank Marlin. I do like that the show illustrates how Vash solves his problems through non-violent, or at least non-lethal means before he has his gun. In the episode where he finally gets it, he even has to defeat a gang of bank robbers solely by inspiring the townspeople to take action. Trigun goes out of its way to show the audience that it's not the gun that makes the man, it's Vash's determination and convictions that give him strength. Although, having that giant gun doesn't quite hurt. It's in episode 5 that Vash finally has to give up his charade and display his true finesse. In a showdown with the monstrous Nebraska family, he has to use his gun to defend the townspeople, who, by the way, were just trying to kill him. Anyway, there's no hiding it anymore, and Meryl does have to admit that this idiot that they've been following is the real humanoid typhoon. He's also able to save everyone without killing, which is something that is integral to Vash's character. Yes, much like Batman, our gun-toting protagonist draws the line at taking a life. It's actually a core part of his character. Also similar to Batman, this facet of his character will be put to the test time and time again. And throughout the show's runtime, Vash will be brought to challenge this belief in increasingly brutal ways. Vash parties with the townspeople after giving them the Nebraska family's bounty. Turns out that the town only wanted Vash dead so that they could use the money to repair their failing plant. Plants appear to be these huge light bulb shaped structures that, through the use of technology lost over 100 years ago, are able to sustain life and produce water and food on the planet's desolate soil. Because these facilities are old technology, the knowledge to maintain and repair them is quite rare. We get a sense that things aren't too hopeful for humanity stuck on this dirt ball. An engineer arrives via a huge land ship called the Sand Steamer, and much to Vash's pleasant surprise, it's an attractive young woman named Elizabeth. She's here to repair the plant and hires Vash as a personal bodyguard. This works out well, and Elizabeth even seems to take a liking to the lovable idiot, until she locks him inside the plant reactor and sets it to self-destruct. It would seem that Vash was responsible for the complete annihilation of the city of July. And while no one was killed when the city was destroyed, the ensuing famine and poverty caused untold horror and death. Elizabeth doesn't care about the plant or the other citizens. She's so blinded by her want for revenge that she's willing to become the exact evil that caused her to go down this path. Vash is able to mysteriously shut down the reactor and emerge unscathed, now seen as a hero to the people. Not only is this couple of episodes a nice side story that shows us more about the world and the people of Trigun, it also helps to push the mystery of Vash the Stampede forward. We get to see a flashback to the aftermath of July City's destruction, and Vash looks pretty much the same age. That supposedly happened around 20 years ago, and we can see that Elizabeth was only a young child at the time. So now we're asking the question, exactly how old is Vash? Because he doesn't look much older than his 20s, maybe he just ages well. Vash, hoping to lose Meryl and MIllie, who are still tailing him and detailing his every move, books a ticket aboard the Sand Steamer. Here he comes under attack by a group of bandits known as the Bad Lads Gang, and their leader, Brilliant Dynamite's Neon, who's the flashiest bandit known to man. Vash and BDN end up having a duel with Vash coming out the victor. Due to this turn of events, the steamer is damaged, and Vash plus the insurance girls end up having to take a bus from the wreckage to the nearby town. They come across a lone figure traveling the sands and decide to stop and save him. This is Nicholas D. Wolfwood, a traveling priest looking to make money to send back to his orphanage. Wolfwood isn't your typical man of the cloth, as he comes across more as a chain-smoking gunslinger, but maybe that's why he carries a huge cross with him to compensate. Vash and Wolfwood don't have very long to get acquainted.
I am known as Valentinez Alcalinella Zihak Shushira Boherets. Gumbi Gobella, Blue Stradivari, Talentrent Pierre, Andre Chartenhemos, Ivanovinci Baldos George, Deutzel Kaiser III. Don't hesitate to call.
As the bus comes under attack by a bunch of robot spider drones. Yet you just never know what you're going to see in the world of Trigun. While saving a passenger, the two get sucked underneath the sands, finding themselves on some sort of old spaceship. Vash and Wolfwood battle their way through the waves of drones until it seems that our hero is cornered without his gun. However, he does manage to destroy the drone off screen, and this just adds to the mystery that is Vash the Stampede. Ultimately, Vash is able to make his way to the factory reactor, and it seems like he speaks to it, asking it to shut itself off. Almost by magic, it complies, and the drone factory once again lies dormant underneath the sands. The unlikely duo spend the next few episodes traveling together. And oh yeah, before I forget, Wolfwood's cross is full of guns. In fact, it turns out that it's just one huge gun. It's fucking awesome, man. You can't tell me otherwise, damn it. It's at this point that we're at the halfway mark, and Trigun starts to take its overarching narrative a little bit more seriously. We're introduced to a man known as Legato Blue Summers, a horrifying monster of an outlaw that belongs to the group known as the Gung-Ho Guns. Legato frames Vash for killing the local shoemaker, and the townspeople throw him in jail for it. Even Meryl and MIllie can't cheer him up as he reflects on what possible actions he could have taken to prevent all of this. Vash doesn't get to contemplate for long, though, as the jail is destroyed by a huge man known as Monev the Gale. Monev goes on a relentless rampage looking for Vash throughout the city. In the process, he kills indiscriminately, leaving a path of death. In the end, Vash lets his anger take over, and we see him really be serious for the first time. He goes so far as to shoot Monev 3 times in the face, and he's only saved by his face shield. Monev escapes for a while before taking another shot at Vash, this time with a rocket launcher. Vash is finally forced to reveal his arm gun to defeat Menev. He comes incredibly close to killing him for what he's done, but a vision of a woman named Rem brings Vash back to his senses. Part of the mystery of who Vash really is starts to unfold, because we now know that at the very least he's some sort of augmented human. Not only does he possess supernatural abilities and skill with firearms, but he has weapons built directly into his body. The power level of his enemies starts to scale up at this point as well. While people like Neon were cool, he pretty much was just a bandit who was kinda weird. The Nebraska family were freaks too, but they did just boil down to a big strong guy that Vash beat incredibly easy. But here with Menev, we have someone that had a shot at actually killing Vash under the right circumstances. And even more powerful is Legato, who we see can literally control people's bodies against their will. Vash, Meryl, and MIllie come across the town where Legato toyed with the citizens. Horrified at the carnage, Vash tells the insurance girls not to follow him any longer, as it's about to get too dangerous. This couple of episodes has some pretty suspect art. There's some shots that they hold on for a really long time that, well, they don't look great. We're introduced to Dominique the Cyclops, a woman with the apparent ability to teleport. It's only when Vash figures out that her eye controls her abilities that he's able to defeat her, and much to his despair, she then takes her own life. While this episode isn't great on the animation front, it does illustrate that the Gung-Ho Guns are both deadly and superhuman, while also being incredibly dedicated to their cause, which appears to be hunting down Vash. 2 weeks pass by as Meryl and MIllie hang out in the town of Genora Rock, waiting for any sign of Vash's reappearance. In the city of Augusta, Vash faces off against two members of the Gung-Ho Guns, E.G. Mine, who shoots spikes out of his ball armor, and then Raiday the Blade. Raiday is the more threatening of the two, and he fights Vash until Legato forces Vash to use an, up until this point, hidden technique. Vash's gun absorbs into his hand, and his entire arm transforms into a huge laser cannon. Vash isn't able to stop himself from firing, but is able to aim his arm straight up, blowing a hole in the fifth moon. Up until now, we've never really known who or what Vash is, and this incident just makes it all the more curious. Why can his arm transform? Is he a robot or an android? Who's commanding Legato and the Gung-Ho Guns? Is it the same person Vash was looking for back at the start of the series? Luckily, the show cannot keep pushing the answers to those questions away any longer, and we are treated to a full episode of exposition after Vash is knocked unconscious after the fifth moon incident. Through the form of a flashback, we find ourselves with a new cast of characters taking place over 100 years before the start of the series. These people are the crew of an interstellar seed ship, one of many ships in an entire fleet that is searching the galaxy for a hospitable place to call home. These ships carry many passengers, most, however, are in suspended animation. The crew we meet are Rem Savarum, Mary, Steve, Rowan, and Joey, and they all seem pretty run-of-the-mill. Well, Steve's a huge asshole who gets drunk and gropes women, but besides that, they all seem to get along. Among the crew are two young, long-haired children, Vash and his brother Knives. At first, everything seems totally fine until Steve refers to the kids as monsters, and we learn that Vash and his brother aren't exactly human. Vash and Knives are what are known as humanoid plants, and they were found after being born aboard one of the seed ships, inside its reactor. Despite that being only 1 year ago, the two have already grown to adolescence. To even really get what's going on here and where Vash comes from, you have to dig into what the plants really are, as up until now the show just presents them as literal power facilities. What they really are is more interesting, a sort of interdimensional biological being that humans created or discovered that they subsequently trap inside these machines to produce energy. Very rarely, humanoid plants such as Vash and Knives can survive outside their prison. At first, the two kids seem like just that, two young children under the care of the crew, mostly Rem. But due to the abusive nature of Steve, who beats Knives and constantly calls him inhuman and a monster, Knives begins to see humans as a parasite. This comes to a head when Knives convinces Mary and Rowan to accuse Steve of rape, and he's sentenced to cryogenic freezing. Knives then works to turn everyone against each other until the point where he gains access to the entire ship's computer system, sending the fleet to crash into the desolate planet below. It's only through the bravery of Rem that most of the ships survive, as she stays behind to reroute the computer system and inevitably blows up with the ship. Vash and Knives survive, with Knives wandering the wastes in search of a plan to destroy the rest of humanity. When we catch back up to the present, our old friend Wolfwood has tracked down a man named Eric's in a frontier town. It would seem that this man is Vash the Stampede, but he vehemently denies this fact. Eventually, Wolfwood is able to talk Vash back into picking up his gun and resuming the hunt for his brother. Also, I don't think they ever say how long it's been in the anime, but according to the manga, there's a 2-year time skip between the 5th moon event and Wolfwood finding Vash, so he's been living as Eric's for quite a while. The two end up taking a trip to a still hovering seed ship, and Vash introduces Wolfwood to his old friends. The people aboard this ship have lived here for generations at this point, and the doc on board is able to give Vash quite an upgrade to his gun arm. The people here are incredibly wary of outsiders, so when Wolfwood discovers a room full of bodies that have been killed by a puppet controlled by the Gung-Ho Gun, Leonoff the Puppet Master, they immediately think he's responsible. Also along for the ride is Hoppard the Gauntlet, a weird shield-using member of the Guns. Vash and Wolfwood fight them off, though a bunch of the Seed's citizens are killed in the battle, and eventually the plant is damaged and the ship descends to the planet, forcing the people to accept their new fate. Wolfwood and Vash travel together until they eventually defeat a gun named Zazzy the Beast, who is unceremoniously killed by Wolfwood. This causes the two to argue, with Vash repeating Rem's line that no one should ever take a life, and Wolfwood saying that sort of logic will only get you killed, and that it's a harsh world. Both of them are right, and it makes the conflict between the two so much more interesting. They decide to have a final duel as they can't see past this difference, but are interrupted by the Gung-Ho Guns, Chapel the Evergreen, and Kane the Longshot. Vash defeats Kane and Wolfwood takes on Chapel. It's revealed that Chapel is actually Wolfwood's mentor, who saved him from life as a child assassin. In the end, Wolfwood defeats Chapel, and it's revealed that he's a Gung-Ho Gun, tasked with bringing Vash in to their leader Knives. Or at least he's being hired by the Guns. It's sort of nebulous, but in the manga, he is a full member. Because Wolfwood does things Vash's way this one time and doesn't kill Chapel, he's shot and goes to the nearby church to die. Wolfwood's death scene is actually really sad. He has this entire internal monologue where he basically just begs God not to let him die, and that he wants to continue, living and going on adventures with Vash, Meryl, and MIllie. It's actually just kind of depressing, and you really just don't know if he's gonna make it or not. Sadly, Wolfwood does lose his life here, and it takes a toll on all the characters. Vash goes into a sort of depression until he's confronted by Legato. Legato ends up controlling all of the townspeople and forming a mob that start beating Meryl and MIllie in front of them. He tells Vash that the only way to stop them is to shoot him in the head and end his life. Legato is Knives' most devout follower, and Knives gave him only one order: to cause pain to Vash the Stampede. Legato knows the best way to do this is to cause Vash to break the one rule that he values above all others: never take a human life. After begging with Legato to stop and having absolutely no way out, Vash pulls the trigger and gives Legato what he wants, ending his life. Vash wakes up 10 days later in a nearby town. Meryl and MIllie have been tending to his wounds and have been working odd jobs to pay for food and board. The townspeople find out Vash is being harbored there and go to kill him, only being stopped when Meryl talks them down using similar words to those of Rem. Vash sees this as an example that people really can be saved without using deadly force, and it gives him the will to keep going. He says his goodbyes to Meryl and MIllie, and he finally goes to confront Knives. Vash finds his brother in the middle of a grassy field, greenery and trees popping up around the barren wasteland. Knives has so much control over his powers as a plant that he can just create life in the middle of the desert. The two have a final duel, both using the full power of the angel arms originally created by Knives. In the end, Vash prevails by sticking true to his beliefs. He shoots Knives in the legs and arms, decisively beating him. Vash the Stampede leaves his guns and red jacket in the desert as he takes his first steps towards a new life. That was the story of Trigun, the anime at least. The manga has a much more in-depth tale that really expands upon the world and characters, and from what I've seen has a much longer ending. The anime leaves us on a hopeful note for Vash, but a less hopeful one for humanity as a whole. The plants are still breaking down more and more. Vash can fix them, sort of, but he's only one person, and outlaws and killers still run rampant. I actually sort of like that about this ending. While Knives and Vash have a huge part to play in the downfall of the initial Seed expedition, there's not much Vash can do alone to alter humanity's course at this point, and so the only thing he can do is keep on living. Of course, the characters are all great and memorable, with Vash the main character being both a lovable idiot and a stoic gunslinger when the need arises. I didn't talk much about Meryl or MIllie in this video because it was already getting to be a bit long, but they are actually great characters as well, and even they get to be in on the action from time to time. Wolfwood is an all-time favorite anime character, and his giant cross not only carries his design, but it also carries the final fight with Knives as well. All of the Gung-Ho Guns are interesting and fun, and Legato is a psychopath that is a terror to behold on screen. All in all, I think anyone would have a fun time watching these character exploits throughout the 26-episode runtime. And that's pretty much all I have to say about Trigun. Of course, there was a movie, Badlands Rumble, in 2011, which I'd also love to take a look at some point. And then there's Trigun Stampede, slated to come out sometime in 2023. Stampede definitely looks interesting. I'm usually not a huge fan of full 3D animated shows, but this one actually looks pretty good. Anyway, look out for that next year. I'm off to go watch about 30 episodes of Gundam Wing in 3 days. See ya!